Single dad sacrifices trip to help ignore deaf elderly woman. Millionaire granddaughter's touchy confrontation sparks fiery family drama. Jake wiped sweat from his brow, exhaustion settling deep in his bones after a long day at the construction site. The promise of a road trip with his daughter, Emily, to that breathtaking national park loomed just around the corner, filling him with hope. They had planned this getaway for months, a chance to bond as father and daughter amid landscapes that echoed their shared dreams. But just as he put the last shovel of gravel into the truck, an unexpected sight caught his attention. A frail, elderly woman struggling with a flat tire on the roadside. He hesitated. After all, he was supposed to prioritize this trip. Emily was counting on him to make their plans happen. A part of him screamed that this was a distraction. Another part recalled his father's solemn lessons about lending a hand when someone was in need. The racing thoughts gnawed at his conscience. Who was he without those values? He pulled over, heart heavy with a mix of duty and dread. Margaret, it turned out, was not just a stranger, but a widow, with stories as colorful as the sunset behind her. She talked with a warmth that cut through his weariness, her hands gesturing animatedly as she described her younger days spent painting vibrant landscapes. Yet, with each story she shared, Jake felt the weight of his own choices. His hours spent laboring away instead of creating memories with Emily were stark against Margaret's fading dreams. Suddenly, the tranquility shattered. Claire, Margaret's estranged granddaughter, stormed up the gravel road, fuming. To her, Jake was an unwelcome specter from the past. The encounter erupted into a whirlwind of accusations. Claire hurled disdain at his working-class roots, while Margaret sat silently, her expression shifting from bemusement to simmering anger. Jake felt a visceral clash of discomfort. Here he was, torn between helping an elder whose wisdom sparked something in him and standing firm against the hostility coming from Claire. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Jake felt knots twisting in his stomach. He wanted to tell Claire she didn't understand. The bond he had with his daughter wasn't defined by wealth. He gripped the tire iron harder, the conflict raging in him. Was helping Margaret worth the trip he had promised Emily? A trip that felt like a lifeline for both of them. He stared at Claire, whose eyes spoke of her own lost opportunities, eyes that had never known the warmth of familial connection, yet held a fierce ambition he had spent years fighting against. This wasn't just about a flat tire anymore. It was a visceral scene of generational discord, ambition clashing with genuine connection. As the air thickened with unspoken words and palpable tension, Jake felt himself being pulled into an emotional maelstrom. Would he ever find clarity? Would he have to choose between nurturing Emily's dreams or risking everything for an unseen legacy that lay behind him? The burden of compromise loomed heavier, and Jake's mind raced as he faced the desperate crossroads of circumstance and commitment. Jake's heart raced, his breath hitching as he absorbed the turmoil surrounding him. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows that mirrored the weight of his choices. He had a daughter waiting for him, filled with excitement for their trip. But here he was, ensnared in a confrontation that went beyond a simple flat tire. It was a battleground of values, aspirations, and unspoken fears. Claire's eyes fired with unyielding intensity, and the quiver in her voice revealed more than contempt. It hinted at a longing for respect and validation. You think you can just swoop in and save her like some knight in shining armor? What do you know about her life?" The bitterness in her words made Jake's skin prickle. Margaret watched the exchange, her silence punctuating the air with a growing tension. Jake's gaze flickered to her, her frail hands now resting calmly on her lap, as though absorbing the discord swirling around her. The moment crystallized. Jake realized this wasn't only about saving Margaret's day, it was also an opportunity for healing. He could forge a connection amid the rift created by misunderstandings. With a swallow of resolve, Jake stepped forward, focusing on Claire. "You're right, I don't know her life, but I do know that compassion doesn't have a price tag. It's about recognizing that we're all part of something bigger than ourselves." His voice trembled, but determination coursed through him as he continued. "Margaret shared her stories with me, and I realized that in our busy lives, it can be easy to forget the humanity in others. Isn't that what family is about?" Claire's expression shifted slightly. Surprise flickered in her eyes as she wrestled with the unfamiliarity of his perspective. "You think I don't care?" she shot back defensively. "No. I think you're angry, and that's okay. We all are in some way." He took a deep breath, inviting them both into a moment of reflection. But empowering each other makes us stronger. Margaret deserves both our time, not just for her, but for us too. Jake stepped back, feeling the weight of his words settle in the air. In articulating his belief, he felt a shift within himself, a newfound clarity about the complexities of altruism and familial ties. It wasn't just about Emily, it was about understanding that bonds could extend beyond bloodlines. Margaret finally spoke, her voice soft yet steady. "Years ago, I lost my son, Claire's father. We were engulfed in a rift brought on by things left unsaid and misunderstandings. All I ever wanted was to rebuild that connection with my family." Tears welled in her eyes, and Jake felt the profound impact of her vulnerability. Claire's defenses faltered. "But I thought—" "I know," Margaret interrupted gently. "We all deal with our own grief in our own ways. Forgiveness, compassion, it starts with acknowledging that we're not alone in this struggle." In that moment, Jake felt a burgeoning sense of change. The emotional chasm that had once felt insurmountable now appeared as a path he could help navigate. As he looked toward Emily, resting in the truck, he knew he had to bring this vulnerability home. The air shifted. Tension dissolved as revelations began to knit together. Jake's heart raced, not with anxiety, but with newfound resolution. He could only hope to mend family ties and inspire his daughter with the power of compassion. "Maybe we should all take a moment and decide whether we want to walk this path together," Jake suggested, the words feeling more like an invitation than a challenge. Claire hesitated, torn between pride and the burgeoning care for her grandmother. As he watched, Jake wondered whether Claire would grasp this moment or let it slip away. With Emily waiting on the edge of the road trip, Jake felt the tug of the promise they had made and the gently brewing storm of familial discontent. The decision hung palpably in the air, and he knew that now, more than ever, they stood on the brink of something transformative. Would Claire choose connection or retreat back into resentment? As the shadows lengthened toward twilight, the next decision loomed, one whose consequences could echo through generations. What path would they choose? As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with deep hues of orange and purple, the mood among the three remained thick with unspoken words. Jake felt the weight of the conversation press against him, each second stretching into eternity as he waited for Claire's decision. Claire's face twisted, a cocktail of anger and realization flashing through her eyes. After the hesitance, she sank onto the edge of the truck, her posture betraying her vulnerability. "You don't understand how hard it is to think about family when the past keeps bubbling up," she finally admitted,
the painting of emotional scars momentarily replacing her defiance. "I've wrestled with my father's mistakes. It's easier to just push them away." Her admission struck Jake like a sudden gust of wind. He remembered the evenings he'd spent grappling with his own failure as a father, his desire for Emily to have certain experiences overshadowed by his inadequacies. Now, facing Claire felt like confronting a part of himself he had struggled to accept. "Maybe it's hard," Jake said slowly, stepping toward her, his heart echoing her pain. "But isn't the struggle part
Of connecting? We can't just bury everything. It doesn't work like that." He could almost see the gears turning in Claire's mind, the battle between her ingrained rejection of vulnerability and the growing urge to understand her grandmother. Just as he was about to press further, a car engine rumbled in the distance, jolting the three of them from the moment. The headlights swept across the road, illuminating the disarray of their emotions. "That's probably my ride," Claire mumbled, glancing over her shoulder, already tempted to pull away and retreat into the safety of uncertainty. Instinctively, Jake raised his voice to speak against the drone of the engine. "Wait! This moment! We can't just let it slip away!" He stepped forward again, urgency fueling his words. "You have a chance here, Claire, a chance to heal, to gather strength from your family. You can change the pattern." "But can I?" she snapped back, a fresh wave of tears threatening to spill over. "Can I just forget all the resentment? I've spent so long building walls to protect myself. What if I break them down only to find more pain?" Jake's heart ached as he recognized her fear. He had wrestled with the same doubt. "You have a choice, Claire. You can choose to let the fear continue to write your story, or you can write a new chapter. It won't be easy, but I believe it's worth it." The certainty in his voice surprised even him, but it was true. He was willing to risk everything, his trip, his comfort, because he saw the potential for change. Margaret, her eyes now shimmering with hope, glanced from Claire back to Jake, the glimmer of connection pulling them all closer. "Please, Claire, I want to tell you my stories, my regrets, all the pieces of this family we've lost sight of. You and I can honor your father's memory together, but I need to know you're with me." Caught in that fragile moment, Claire visibly quaked, her resolve weakened. The decision weighed heavy, not just for her, but for the many threads of their entangled past. She tilted her head back, inhaling deeply as if bracing for impact. Just then, a honk from the waiting car snapped the air held in anticipation. "Claire?" Jake called softly, knowing this was the pivotal moment. "You don't have to do this alone. Choose connection." The shadows cloaked them, and with a deep breath, Claire stood, visibly trembling. It was a decision born from uncertainty, yet stirrings of resolve mingled in the depths of her being. "Okay," she said finally. Barely audible, but solid. "Let's try." As those words hum in the air, something profound shifted within Jake. Finally, he felt a flicker of hope. This was not just about rectifying past mistakes. It was about the future, about creating an unbreakable bond that could redefine their realities. But how far these revelations would stretch, and whether everyone would embrace. The path ahead was still unknown. As Claire stepped away from the truck and closer to her grandmother, embracing what she had been running from, Jake's next thoughts spiraled into a fierce internal battle. Could this fragile connection truly lead them all to healing? He eyed Emily wistfully, waiting in the truck. The road trip promised adventure and happiness, yet it was suddenly overshadowed by this daunting new complexity. Would the journey toward familial healing generate more detours than expected? And would they all emerge stronger, or would the weight of the past entangle them once more? The edges of uncertainty sharpened into focus, pressing against the heart of the fierce quest for connection. The air thickened with a delicate tension as Claire approached Margaret, each step resonating with uncharted territory. Jake watched, heart pounding, as their silhouettes merged against the fading light. This connection, budding against the shadows,
felt fragile yet fortified by unspoken histories. Jake's instincts battled between the joy of witnessing this moment and the gnawing apprehension about what it might mean for him and Emily. Margaret extended her hand, trembling slightly, drawing Claire closer. "I've carried so much weight alone," she spoke, her voice quavering like leaves in a gentle breeze. "Let us share this journey together." Claire hesitated, glancing back at Jake, her expression betraying a cocktail of vulnerability and fear. Facing her grandmother required shedding the layers of protection she'd worn like armor. Jake felt the surge of his own memories, each bound to a time when he had to confront uncomfortable truths, not just to survive, but to grow. "Go on," he urged, his voice steady. "It's time to set it all free." In that moment, he recognized the raw potential of vulnerability, the deep-seated desire to unearth unfinished stories. This wasn't just an emotional transaction for Claire, it was the groundwork for affirming her own identity. As Claire took her grandmother's hand, the last vestiges of daylight flickered away. They faded into the shadow of an old tree's embrace, leaving Jake feeling increasingly like an outsider caught in the whirlwind of their reunion. He suddenly experienced a sharp pang of isolation, as if the very air around him separated him from that bond. Yet beneath the surface of his own discomfort, Jake sensed opportunity. The road trip had promised more than moments of levity. It had delivered profound challenges ripe for exploration. Watching Claire lean into her grandmother, he envisioned how he might document this experience beyond the confines of the journey. A book chronicling moments of connection, resilience, and transformation. He had long dismissed the pursuit of writing as a futile dream, overshadowed by his obligations as a father. But now, with Claire forging a courageous path toward connection, Jake felt a reconnection with his own ambitions. Maybe there was more to his story, a hidden talent waiting to be unveiled. Perhaps he could intertwine his narrative with theirs, documenting their journey not just for himself, but as a testimony for those struggling in
similar confrontations. Feeling invigorated, Jake couldn't help but imagine how he could frame this moment, a tale of reconnection against the odds. But doubts tugged at him, each a thread woven from years of self-doubt. What if he faltered in capturing the depth of their experience? What if the stories he yearned to tell remained forever locked within him? But there was no turning back now. He reached for his phone, thumb hovering over the notes app, teetering on the brink of creation. While they immersed themselves in their shared narrative, he could contribute his own, couldn't he? The sound of laughter broke through his thoughts, a joy so innocent that it jarred him. Claire and Margaret emerged from their embrace, sharing something that resembled warmth, a foundational moment sparking ripples of hope. Jake realized he had a chance to pivot on their momentum, using his writing to not only help others, but also to reclaim a part of himself that seemed to have evaporated among duties and distractions. Yet, as he began jotting down phrases and thoughts, he sensed an unsettling silence creeping back. What if this narrative didn't end well? What if the moment of family unity cracked under the weight of past grievances? The path they chose was steep with possibility, but also riddled with uncertainty. Deep in thought, he amassed an internal resolve, knowing the next step was pivotal. He must face his own fears and put everything into his ambition. Would he have the courage to share the emerging story as they traveled forward together? The complex threads of connection unraveled before him while he wrestled with his next move. How to align the truth of their journey with the hope of reconciliation and healing. With the pen poised, Jake glanced back at the pair bonding under the canopy of night. It was in their union that the heart of this narrative would lie, a testament to grit and the essence of family. And with that, a new question dawned on him. How far would he go to reveal the truth buried within the stories of their past and his aspirations? The night grew deeper, shadows stretching long across the ground, as Jake's focus shifted inward, the whirlwind of thoughts spiraling around his ambitions.
Standing before the old tree, the quiet night encapsulated him in a cocoon of contemplation that felt both suffocating and liberating. The vibrant laughter from Claire and Margaret drifted into the air, a flutter of warmth that felt too distant. Each chuckle inexplicably reminded him of his own upbringing, a chaos of familial bonds intermingled with deep-seated worries. For so long he'd built walls around himself, convinced that every ounce of energy must go into being a good father to Emily. Sacrificing the illusion of self for the reality of responsibility, he kept his dreams at bay. Yet here, witnessing Claire's transformation, he could see how she was unearthing her own identity, illuminating a path that he had neglected for far too long. The conflation of their journeys sparked a resolute disquiet within him. If Claire could claim her history, why couldn't he explore his? Backing away to a quieter corner, he reopened the Notes app. Slowly, he typed, letting his fingers dance across the keyboard. The deep wounds of the past might hide the stories that bind us together. Each word felt risky, like lifting a veil on emotion long suppressed. He felt a rush of insight, the realization that his vulnerability could intertwine with theirs. Perhaps that was the nuance he needed. But moments later, self-doubt slithered back in, cold and cloying. What if he misrepresented their journey? What right did he have to speak on Claire's relationship with Margaret? These fears felt abrasive against the scribbled lines of hope forming on the screen. He wrestled with his instinct to retreat back into silence rather than explore the implications of his voice. Suddenly, he became acutely aware of the delicate balance he must strike, committing to his ambition while honoring their shared experience. Perhaps he would need Claire's input. Would she allow him to narrate her journey? The mingling of their stories resonated with a sense of purpose, a powerful thread connecting their lives. A necessary risk. But still, he hesitated. What would Claire think? Would he be imposing an expectation rather than fostering her own growth? With a sigh, he let his thoughts coalesce again into a singular question, that nagging fear. Was he brave enough to step beyond the limits he had placed on himself? Documenting Claire's and Margaret's reunion came with an innate vulnerability that mirrored the essence of his own ambitions. It was as though each revelation around him set off ripples in his soul, bouncing between fear and determination. Resolute but anxious, Jake pulled his gaze away from the screen, finding solace in the intimacy of the moment. Claire and Margaret continued exchanging stories, laughter spilling into the night as they forged a bridge between past and present. The echoes felt hauntingly familiar, yet they propelled him toward a decisive choice. With newfound clarity, he realized it was time to face the depth of his fear head-on, not just for himself, but to help foster the bond between Claire and her grandmother. There was power in storytelling. If done with honesty, it could heal, ignite, and even inspire change. As he turned away from the glimmers of their reunion, he made a promise to dig deeper. The stakes had risen, and he would take the plunge. No longer an observer, but a participant, willing to intertwine fate with the words he crafted. Now it was no longer just about reclaiming his own dreams. It was about embracing the complex tapestry of human connection. What was he prepared to sacrifice in the pursuit of their shared truth? With that thought taking hold, he realized he was edging closer to a crossroads. The moment of truth was approaching, where he would have to reckon with whether to unveil the narrative hidden in the shadows. The real questions: how far would he go to forge a deeper connection, and in doing so, what might he have to confront in himself? The dawn broke quietly the next morning, bathing the sky in muted colors that felt both gentle and revealing. Jake sat at his kitchen table, a steaming cup of coffee in hand, but the warmth did little to thaw the chill of uncertainty that had settled in his chest. The room, once a sanctuary, now felt more like a cage. His fingers traced the rim of the mug, replaying the previous night's revelations over and over. What had initially felt brave now tethered him to a palpable anxiety. It nagged at him, urging him to act, yet tethering him to the safety of his self-imposed limitations. Would the time spent pursuing the intertwined stories of Claire and Margaret truly yield the connection he sought, or would it spiral into an uncomfortable confrontation he wasn't ready to face? In the depths of his indecision, Jake recognized a newfound desire, a longing not only to document other stories, but also to confront his own muted voice. Each recollection he veered back to was infused with an urgency, as if every moment spent in hesitation stole a page from the narrative he had yet to write. He wasn't merely a bystander, he was a participant in this intricate pattern of life woven together with Claire's and Margaret's narratives. Driven by this awakening, Jake glanced around his home office. Stacks of notebooks lay scattered about, remnants of half-finished projects abandoned in moments of self-doubt. They echoed his struggle, silent witnesses of the conflict between the father he had become and the creative spirit he had locked away. On impulse, he grabbed one of the notebooks and a pen, feeling the rough edges of the paper under his fingertips, an inviting canvas for unfiltered thoughts. He began to write, allowing the words to flow freely. I am not just Emily's father. I am a storyteller. The rush of ink on paper felt cathartic, liberating him from the layers of hesitation shrouding his ambitions. The act reminded him of the power of storytelling. It could challenge perceptions, reshape identities, and bring forth the hidden threads of truth waiting to be uncovered. With each word that filled those empty pages, he allowed himself to recall snippets of his past, the moments of laughter, pain, triumph, and uncertainty that crafted the portrait of who he had become. The surface might have appeared unremarkable, but underneath lay the tumultuous canvas of his life, vibrant and rich with experience. In confronting his own narratives, he forged a path toward understanding Claire's struggles more deeply, making his way toward a crucial confrontation with a truth he had long avoided. Time slipped away as he wrote, and before he realized it, hours had passed. The pen paused mid-word as a creeping fear nudged its way back to his thoughts. What if he gathered his stories but failed to voice Claire's and Margaret's? Experiences authentically? Was he equipped to bear witness? Ranching doubts swirled within him, and he decided it was time to reach out to Claire. A part of him feared her reaction. Would she accept the invitation to collaborate or see it as an encroachment on her autonomy? As he typed a brief message asking to meet, something shifted in him. The blend of anticipation and dread stirred a commitment to openness. Sharing not just his desires, but also his fears felt like the very essence of connection he sought to craft. As he sent the message, weight settled on his shoulders. He understood now that forging connections required more than fixing eyes on someone else's dilemma. It required the recognition that he too bore a story worthy of sharing. Did this mark the beginning of a deeper exploration, or would it plunge him into confrontation that tested every fiber of his being? The question lingered in the air, heavy and unresolved, as he awaited her response. Would Claire embrace the narrative or recoil from the complications? The clock's relentless tick echoed in his ears, a constant reminder that the story of them was just beginning to unfold. As the day wore into the afternoon, Jake found himself pacing in his living room, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound cutting through the tension wrapping around him. Each tick of the clock felt closer to a reckoning he was both yearning for and dreading. He had sent the message to Claire hours ago, and the silence that followed taunted his resolve. Jake inhaled deeply, his mind racing through scenarios. What if she didn't respond? What if she responded with anger? The doubts nestled back in, whispering reminders of all the ways he had managed to disappoint others. Could he bear the weight of Claire's displeasure if she rejected his invitation to collaborate? His thoughts turned to his past failures, the stories left untold, the art left unmade. They lined the walls of his mind like portraits of regrets. But then a flicker of determination ignited within him.
The act of reaching out was a leap of faith, a bridge he had built over the chasm of fear. He didn't want to fall back into that isolation, hiding behind insecurities and the shadows of what could have been. Compelled by the urge to act, Jake turned toward his writing desk. He pored over the pages he had filled earlier, each ink stroke a testimony to his burgeoning desire to express himself. If successful, this exploration of Claire and Margaret's lives could allow him to peel back the layers that had cloaked his fatherly identity. He could merge those identities into something richer, something that acknowledged his depth instead of fragmenting his sense of self. Yet the familiar anxiety loomed heavy, a specter lurking amid his newfound drive. Fear that perhaps by probing into their stories, he could inadvertently dredge up pain that had long been buried in Claire and Margaret. Was he invading their sanctums, or were his intentions indeed aligned with being a compassionate witness? The instinct to protect both his own feelings and theirs reminded him of the personal stakes layered within this collaborative endeavor. Just as his thoughts spiraled into another labyrinth of what-ifs, a chime interrupted the quiet. He grabbed his phone. Claire's name lit up the screen. His heart raced. Thoughts simultaneously raced to both possibilities of acceptance and rejection. With shaking hands, Jake opened the message, heart pounding against his chest. Would she extend an olive branch, or would he feel the flame of rejection? "Hey Jake, I'm sorry for the delay," her text read. "I was caught up with work. Let's meet. I have a lot to share." Relief poured over him, a soothing balm against the anxiety that had built up. But as it waned, it was replaced with anticipation. Now came the task of revealing his intentions, trusting Claire with not only the stories, but his own vulnerabilities. Jake drafted a response, weighing each word, letting the sincerity spill onto the screen. "I really appreciate it. How about getting coffee tomorrow? There's something I want to discuss as well." With his message sent, he leaned back on the sofa, grappling with a wave of emotions. The prospect of their meeting thrummed with a sense of new possibilities. Could this be the turning point in his own narrative? In the stillness of the moment, the reflection of his journey danced in his mind. This wasn't merely about Claire and Margaret. It was also about his reclamation, repositioning himself from a passive participant into someone who acknowledged and shared his identity. Now he faced a new oscillation of tension. Would Claire open up to working together? Would their created space allow for both of them to grapple with their stories authentically? The stakes had shifted, expanded to encompass not just others' revelations, but the uncertain undertaking of revealing parts of himself he had tucked away. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Jake found himself, for the first time in years, standing at the precipice of something truly transformative. The next chapter loomed not just for Claire's story, but his own. What awaited him in their dialogue, the practicing of bravery in partnership, held the potential for stories to bloom, or for old wounds to resurface. Would he dare push forward into this open terrain of vulnerability? The challenge to intertwine their narratives now rested entirely in his hands, and the moment for clarity was fast approaching. Jake spent the night in a restless state, the anticipation and anxiety swirling in equal measure within him. Sleep came in fits and starts, each minute of it punctuated by visions of his impending meeting with Claire. He awoke early, unsettled but resolved. This was more than just a coffee meeting. It was a critical step into a conversation that could shift not only his understanding of Claire and Margaret, but also his perception of himself. He dressed carefully, choosing each item for a purpose, namely, the soft blue shirt, chosen for its calming tone, reminded him of his commitment to approach the conversation without pretense. As he looked in the mirror, he tried to gather himself. He noticed the faint shadows under his eyes, a testament to the previous night's whirlwind of thoughts. Yet they also hinted at his determination. Jake arrived at the cafe a little early, taking a moment to breathe in the ambiance. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee surrounded him, mingling with the muted conversations of patrons lost in their own lives. It contrasted sharply with the whirlpool of uncertainty he felt inside. He opted for a table in the corner that afforded him a view of the entrance,
a tactical choice fueled by his need to prepare himself for Claire's arrival. Minutes morphed into an eternity. The internal clock was wound tightly with apprehension. What if she walked in, and the weight of their past took the forefront? What if they got swept into a cycle of old hurts? He rubbed his palms on his thighs, trying to assuage the unease niggling at him. At last he spotted her, a silhouette framed by the cafe's entrance, her hair catching the light in a way that made him momentarily forget his reservations. The smile she offered him upon entering was genuine, yet it juxtaposed the gravity of the conversations that lay ahead. As she approached, her demeanor immediately disarmed him, but he couldn't shake the feeling of tension tightening around them. "Hey, Jake," she said, her voice warm. "Thanks for suggesting this. I really needed a break." They settled into their chairs, the initial banter drifting along comfortably but briefly. Jake was painfully aware of the underlying significance of their meeting and the revelations soon to emerge. "Before we dive into things, I want to say how important this is to me," he began, his voice steadier than he felt. "I know we both have stories, yours about Margaret and mine about, well, everything. I think we can help each other get to a deeper understanding." He could see Claire's gaze sharpen. The familiarity of her awareness cut through the air, and he felt an impulse to probe deeper. "How do you feel about sharing our experiences in this project?" She leaned back slightly, clearly evaluating him. "I wasn't sure how you'd approach it. I have a lot bottled up. It's been tough navigating it all without feeling I'm dragging someone else down." That struck Jake directly. The weight of shared burdens, the fear of emotional entanglement echoed through his own experience. "I understand that fear, but in opening up, we might lighten the load, right?" They spent the next hour navigating through dialogue laced with vulnerability. Claire shared anecdotes that revealed the complexities of her relationship with Margaret, while Jake imparted his own struggles with balancing fatherhood and personal aspirations. In those moments, a sense of solidarity blossomed. Yet, as their discussion unfolded, Jake was acutely aware that they were edging closer to the core of vulnerability, the risks that accompanied unfiltered honesty. He found himself wrestling with two forces, the urge to dig deeper and the instinct to shield both himself and Claire from potential pain. Determined to push through the discomfort, he broached a topic that had clung to the edges of his thoughts. What if we consider the implications of our past decisions, how they shape us, not just within this project, but as individuals? The change in Claire's expression told him he had struck a nerve. She looked thoughtful, her gaze drifting momentarily before locking back onto him. "You're right. Maybe we've both been holding on to things that define us too tightly." The atmosphere shifted, thickening with the weight of unspoken truths. Would they dare explore the hidden narratives that chained them to their histories? With a newfound urgency, Jake sensed an opportunity to deepen their connection, but also felt a pang of fear. This was more than professional. It was a leap into their personal landscapes, providing each other with an intimate map of vulnerabilities. Could he handle what Claire might reveal, and could she embrace his own unguarded truths? The boundary between their narratives teetered on the brink of intersection, and in that moment, Jake recognized that this project was no longer just about stories. It was about healing. Jake's heart pounded as he prepared for what might come next. Would they interlace their fears and dreams, or would they shy away from the deeper dialogue lying just below the surface? As the cafe buzzed with life around them, the possibility of a shared journey loomed large, casting a shadow over both their pasts and the future ahead. The silence that followed Jake's question felt heavy, as if time had settled around them like dust in an undisturbed room. Claire's expression shifted, interest transformed into introspection. He could see her weighing the cargo of her own experiences, considering the fragile threads of their conversation. What if we upset the fragile balance we've created? She finally mused, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake's brow furrowed as he leaned in slightly, intrigued yet wary. "We won't know if we don't try," he replied, his tone firming into resolve, though the tremor in his chest told him otherwise. "We owe it to ourselves to explore what lies beneath. It's the key to understanding how we got here." The ringing of a bell overhead punctuated the moment, a reminder of the bustling world outside. Yet here they were, teetering on the precarious edge of emotional revelation. Kate took a sip of her coffee, gathering her thoughts, while Jake's mind raced. Each breath drew in the weight of his intentions and the prospect of unveiling hidden layers of their lives. "What if I told you I've been haunted by the choices I made?" Claire's face was earnest, vulnerability etched in her features. "Leaving my career behind to care for Margaret, I thought I was doing the right thing, but sometimes I wonder
if I was just afraid of who I might become without that safety net." Her confession pierced the air, resonating with Jake's own internal debate. How often had he wrestled with the demons of his own sacrifices? The silent screams of doubt echoed within him, tightening his chest. "I get that," he admitted, urgency layering his voice. "I sacrificed my ambitions to take care of my kids, to be there. But in doing so, I often lost sight of what I wanted for myself." Jake's vulnerability hung between them, creating a fissure of honesty. He watched as Claire absorbed his words, her gaze steady and unyielding. Was this the connection they needed to cultivate, a shared acknowledgement of their burdens? "You risk losing your identity," she said softly, her eyes searching his. "But I think we can define who we are, together. Maybe that's where the healing begins." In that moment, decisions crystallized. Jake realized that he didn't want just to exist in this space anymore. He craved a more profound connection, an unearthing of truths that would bind them not just as collaborators, but as allies in healing. "But what about the fear of disappointment?" he challenged her. The words bit at him, revealing his own apprehension. "What if we open those doors and discover we're not what we hoped?" Claire smiled, a bittersweet expression that held layers of understanding. "We take that risk because the alternative is far scarier. Living in fear or regret is a prison, Jake. We owe it to ourselves to push through the discomfort." At that moment, Jake found himself staring at a fork in the road. Her words ignited something within him, an insatiable hunger to confront the past. He could feel the crescendo of their stories reaching a climax, echoing the significance of what they were beginning to share. Driven by an impulse he couldn't ignore, Jake leaned in further, his voice charged with determination. "Then let's confront it. What if we plan to share our experiences, every single part, no matter how unsettling? What if we committed to this journey as a means to not just understand each other, but to redefine ourselves?" A flicker of excitement crossed Claire's face, her expression a mix of encouragement and hesitation. "That's a daunting proposition, but if we want to heal and grow, perhaps it's exactly what we need." Jake's heart raced, adrenaline propelling him forward. Could this be a turning point for both of them? The potential of shared vulnerability seemed overwhelming, yet exhilarating, a makeshift bond forged in the fires of their struggles. As they continued to converse, the cafe faded into a distant hum. Their mutual resolve formed a palpable energy, igniting the possibility of true transformation. But the question lingered in Jake's mind, piercing through the warmth of connection. Were they truly ready to face the dark corners of their lives? The moment of truth was approaching, and with it, the weight of what it might reveal. As the clock ticked, the stakes rose, leaving Jake grappling with the tension threading through their dialogue. Were they ready to meet their pasts, or would old fears steer them back into the shadows? One thing was clear. The journey ahead demanded they confront their deepest fears together. The days following the breakthrough conversation weighed heavily on Jake's mind. Each moment served as a reminder of the promise he had made to explore both his and Claire's vulnerabilities.
The initial excitement had given way to uncertainty, gnawing at his resolve and causing him to reconsider the stakes involved in revealing such deeply seated emotions and memories. At the cafe, they had agreed to explore the complexities of their stories, but now the prospect felt daunting. Jake spent his evenings crafting outlines, ideas, topics, and potential angles to share, all of which swirled in his mind, forming connections he had previously overlooked. As he pored over his notes, palpable fear fluttered through him. He was poised on the verge of something significant, yet also intimidating. Finally, the day arrived for their first dedicated writing session. Jake arrived early, the familiar cafe buzzing with patrons around him as he claimed a spot near the window, sunlight filtering through and casting warm patterns on the table. The ambiance surrounding him felt charged with potential, each person a reminder that everyone held a story waiting to be told. Jake fiddled with his notebook, excitement juxtaposed with the shadows of apprehension lurking in his consciousness. When Claire arrived, looking slightly disheveled but brightly lit with determination, they greeted each other with a shared sense of purpose. "Hey," Claire said, sliding into her seat. "I thought about everything since our last chat. I can't believe we're finally doing this." "Me too," Jake replied, attempting a smile while internally grappling with what lay ahead. "It feels like a leap into the unknown." They dove into the complexities of their connections with Margaret. The stories flowed with unexpected ease, no longer shrouded in fear. They opened up about their fears and disappointments, shedding light on how familial relationships had molded their identities. The energy surged between them, a creative synergy emerging, punctuated by moments of laughter and insights. As they transitioned deeper into the exploration of their pasts, Jake found himself sharing vulnerabilities he had long tucked away. "Sometimes I feel like a failure," he admitted slowly, careful with his words. "The expectations I've placed on myself to provide for Emily came at the cost of my own dreams. I've feared stepping into what I truly want because it feels selfish." A flicker of understanding sparked in Claire's eyes. "I get that. I've sacrificed big parts of my life too. My career was everything. I thought following that path would bring fulfillment. But now I can't shake the feeling that I lost myself along the way. What if we focused less on what we gave up and more on who we can become?" Jake suggested. It felt liberating to voice those sentiments, pushing them both swiftly toward the possibility
of renewal and hope. Hours faded into thoughts exchanged, reflections shared, and a newfound authenticity grounded their connection. As they poured their stories onto paper, the magnitude of this collaboration crystallized for Jake. This wasn't just about obtaining clarity. It was also about reclaiming their respective identities. At the end of the session, Claire propped her chin on her hand thoughtfully. "If we weave our stories together, it could mean more than just recounting experiences. It could be transformative." "Exactly," Jake agreed, invigorated. "We can create a narrative that illuminates the healing found in vulnerability. It's not about glorifying our struggles, but finding strength in them." That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jake felt a renewed purpose guiding him. The weight of self-doubt started to lift, replaced by a solid sense of potential. He would no longer cower behind unfulfilled dreams. Instead, he could channel them into something both meaningful and enlightening. Their project shifted into motion, and they began meeting weekly, each time layering in more insights and discoveries. Each session expanded their understanding, both of themselves and each other, while simultaneously mending the fractured perceptions they had held regarding their worth and identities. Then came the milestone, an invitation to present their accumulating narrative at a small local community gathering. The thought sent a ripple of exhilaration through Jake and Claire. As they stood before the audience, sharing heartfelt recollections transformed into narratives alive with poignancy, Jake felt a sense of accomplishment washing over him. The applause felt like warm sunlight pouring over them. More than validation, it solidified their growth. They had confronted the vulnerabilities tethering them to their pasts and emerged as agents of healing. In an unexpected twist, Claire's gaze met Jake's as they stepped down from the stage, her eyes shimmering with a commendable pride.
"We did it," she whispered. "Together." Jake's response was a heartfelt smile. The invisible barriers that once held him captive now transformed into bridges of connection. In that moment, he knew beyond doubt that he had achieved more than personal growth. He had helped Claire rediscover her sense of self, and together they had woven a tapestry of courage and resilience. As the audience mingled, Jake looked around, feeling a deep-rooted satisfaction swell within. No longer merely Emily's father, he was now a storyteller who didn't shy away from vulnerability, but embraced it. It was undeniable. He had reclaimed his identity in the pursuit of shared wisdom. He made a pact with himself that night, solidifying his resolve to pursue his ambitions unyieldingly, to intertwine the spirits of his journeys with those of others, and to champion every unvoiced story worth uncovering. The life he envisioned lay ahead, woven from everything they had forged together. It was maddeningly beautiful and replete with possibilities, and he would not hesitate to weave it amid the stories of connection ignited on that unforgettable night. Now, without hesitation, they stepped into the future, one promising of adventures for both familial connections and creative aspirations.
Bridging their lives together. This is your moment to act. If you've resonated with this story, don't wait even one more second to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional tales that inspire connection and growth. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep these stories alive, as each click matters. Comment below your reactions and theories about Jake and Claire's journey. Your voice is vital. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion. You need to support the channel to explore more stories of overcoming challenges. Let's inspire transformation together.